Okay, it looks like we are all set to go. So welcome everyone to the December 15th Sherwood School District Board meeting. I'd like to welcome you, and some of us are here in person. Most of the board, Director Adamson is joining us virtually. So with that, we'll go ahead and start our meeting, call to order, and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please rise.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you. And with that, we will move on to the first item on the agenda, our second, which is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second? I second. Any discussion, comments, questions, clarifications? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and all those in favor of passing the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. Moving right along onto our favorite section of the meeting, we'll move to Spotlight On, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Brady Strutz. Sorry about that.
Thank you,
Not
Ben.
only did we surprise you, but we didn't turn the mic on. So
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. So greetings, Superintendent Cordy, Chair Hecker, and school board directors. My name is Brady Strutz, and I'm the Associate Director of Technology for the district. I'm here tonight to present an update on the Emergency Connectivity Fund. So earlier this fall, the Sherwood School District was awarded a $1.2 million grant from the federal government to ensure every student has access to remote learning. The Emergency Connectivity Fund, or ECF, is a $7 billion program to help schools and libraries provide the tools and services their communities need for remote learning during the COVID-19 emergency period. Congress authorized the Emergency Connectivity Fund as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 via the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC. Wave 1 application window closed August 13th, 2021. Award notices came in September 2021. So what does it cover? So for eligible schools, the ECF program will cover reasonable costs of laptop and tablet computers, as well as Wi-Fi solutions for off-campus use by students and school staff. The ECF grants up to a $400 credit for qualifying device purchases. ECF funds may also cover Wi-Fi solutions for qualifying off-campus use by students and school staff. So for some info on how the funding works, much like the federal E-rate program, which we are also a member of, school districts pay the full price upfront and receive a reimbursement from the FCC via our E-rate provider. Now, E-rate funds historically come annually. However, for our hardware purchases, we expect a shorter turnaround on the reimbursement. We can submit as soon as we receive the goods. For our hotspot and Wi-Fi reimbursements, those will come at the end of the year. So we're excited to put this grant to use immediately. It's already in use. And here's what we'll be able to do with it this year. First, secondary student devices. We have been able to order new Chromebooks for all students in grades 6 through 12. And with the budget, we've been able to buy upgraded computer processors to enhance video conferencing capabilities, which is critical during this time. We've also been able to purchase new instructional assistant devices, which are Chromebooks that are video conference capable. We've been able to put a $400 credit towards new staff laptops for teachers and office staff. So many staff work on desktop computers currently, which restricts their ability to work remotely and move throughout the district. And our current staff desktops and laptops were due to be replaced. And this fund gives us a credit towards that process that was already going to happen. In addition, hotspots will be a part of this grant allocation, Eligible hotspot uses will be reimbursed at the end of the school year. And ECF eligibility is directly related to needs-based access to remote learning for students and staff throughout our district. So we do have currently a pending grant request, and it is for K-5 devices. You'll notice that was not a part of our previous list. We didn't meet the criteria based upon our plans at the time of the wave one window. Luckily enough, there was additional funding after wave one window. And so they created a wave one and a wave two. And we applied during the wave two window in October. We're awaiting an FCC decision. We have yet to hear back. If we do not receive those funds, we already have bond replacement scheduled for K-5 in fall 2022 for our Chromebooks for grades 3 through 5, and in fall 2023 for iPads. And if the printed version says fall 2021 for iPads, that was an error, my apologies. So some of the larger benefits for the ECF. So first and foremost, it ensures student access. The $400 credit significantly raises our student device budget to allow for improved student and instructional assistant video conferencing capabilities, which again are so critical during this time. It extends our technology bond impact. These were pre-planned purchases on a schedule via the bond that we were able to replace with ECF funds. Our mission for the bond and the ECF's goal aligned really fortuitously this year. It also moves up the device refresh date for staff and students by a few months, which is very nice. And finally, it increases staff mobility, especially for our instructional assistants and office staff who have had stationary or underpowered devices. They can now serve students in a variety of settings. Next steps. We are receiving orders as they come in. We're patiently navigating the current shipping realities, and we're setting up and deploying devices just as soon as they come in and delivering them to staff and students. We've already set up and delivered all of our IA Chromebooks, and we're currently getting over 1,200 middle school devices ready for a deployment, and we're coordinating with SMS for a January deployment. In short, we're really excited about this opportunity via the ECF, and we're so excited to be able to continue to serve staff and students. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Any more
Thank you
questions?
very much.
So I just want to say, I had no idea about this grant, so this is exceptional. Thank you for sharing this with us. This is great news and amazing because we can also, use those bond dollars further down the road as well. But I feel like I haven't seen you for a very long time, so it's great to see you, and just really want to thank you for the tremendous efforts the last few years with technology. I can't imagine what your department went through in this pandemic and what you continue to do. So in addition to what you've done with this grant, I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Director Hecker, may I add something? So I would just like people to know that this grant we saw as a long shot based on how we thought the distribution of dollars would go. But Brady and his team took the time to go ahead and apply. And as you see the results, it's been fantastic for the district. And so Brady and his team get a lot of credit for taking a shot and going after these resources for us.
It doesn't surprise me. I had a feeling that was the case. So thank you again. Amazing efforts and so needed at this time. So appreciate it. And please pass our thanks on to your team as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Mitchell from SHS.
All right, Superintendent Cordy, Chair Hecker, Board of Directors. It is my honor to get to come up here today and talk about the wonderful fall athletics and activity season that we had. I have some wonderful guests here that we will get to in just a moment, but you'll have to listen to me first. So this information was in your board packet, so I'm not going to go through all of the individual names because the wonderful thing with Sherwood High School is it's very lengthy, and we have a lot of people who are very dedicated to what they do and their passion and are very successful, and it's wonderful to watch. And so I'm going to go through a few highlights with each sport and activity. and then turn it over to these gentlemen. So one that was not on the board packet that occurred in that time between when it was submitted and now is our dance team. There was a very large regional competition that occurred a couple weeks ago, and our dance team received second place in Palm and first place in hip hop, which was a huge accomplishment for them. Our marching band, they're just phenomenal. They continue to be outstanding every year. And we hosted a very, very large marching band competition with teams from at least 4 states, if not more. And our team finished in 3rd place in their division, another huge accomplishment. Moving to football, our team we had a rough start, and then something clicked and we got it going, and they took a run through the playoffs that was very impressive, and in fact beat the number 4 team in the state and got to the quarterfinals. And we're just really exciting to watch at the end there. There's a huge list of players that were first team, second team, honorable mention, all league. And the best thing to look at that is that most of those are not seniors. So we have a lot of really outstanding players coming back and looking forward to a real exciting team next year. Volleyball is in a very similar situation. They had an excellent season. They got caught up in a playoff game, but they show a lot of promise, and we're really excited to see them move on next year. Girls soccer continues to be a strength of Sherwood, and they made it into the state quarterfinals, losing on the last penalty kick of the game. And so it went to overtime, went into penalty kicks, gave it all they had, and just lost in that last bit. One of the big highlights was they ended up early in the season, beat the number 1 team in the state, Grant. And so that was a big win. Boys soccer, very similar to football, turned it on at the end of the year and moved themselves up the rankings and got into the playoffs, and then lost a real tough one to Mountainside in the first round, but really proud of how they competed and stuck with it. Girls cross country, 6th at state, won the league. Our district meet had 5 girls on the first team all league, which is almost the entire varsity team. And then one of our seniors signed with Oregon recently. So that's a big accomplishment. That's a big running school. And then boys cross country, 5th at state, won the league. Again, many gentlemen on the first team, second team, all league, all state. And extremely proud to announce that James Crabtree was the state champion for Oregon in cross country for the boys. It's very rare to have a state champion at any sport, but when I think about an individual sport like this and the thousands of kids who are doing this, and what it takes to go to you have one race. It's not like the playoff bracket and all those kind of things. And so just incredibly proud of James and really happy that he could join us today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ty Stammers here, the head coach, to talk more about James.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate your time. I just put a few words down on paper because if I didn't, I would ramble on for hours, and we don't have hours. So I'd just like to give a few highlights of James' season because he wasn't just the state champion. He had definitely some other highlights for himself. So he was the 2021 Hole in the Wall Invitational champion up in Washington, setting a new meet record. He not only broke the record once, but he broke the record twice for the school and finished in a time of 14:34 this year with a new school record. He was the Pacific League champion, the OSA 6A state champion, and then he finally finished his season running at the Running Lane National Cross Country Championships in Alabama. Just a couple weeks ago, he finished 17th in the nation, broke his record again, as I said, finishing in a time of 14:34. Just a few thoughts as a head coach, and this is my 25th year of coaching high school cross country and track, and I can honestly say James is probably one of the most amazing athletes I've had the opportunity to coach. I feel very fortunate. He's a 4-year varsity athlete in the program. Along with his teammates, he's contributed to raising the program to being one of the top programs in the state of Oregon. He's a coach's dream athlete as he trains consistently, is committed to his team and teammates, and has an unwavering desire to improve. He has been one of our team leaders this year, helping role model what it takes to be a varsity athlete at a high level. But most importantly, he's extremely humble about his accomplishments and one of the kindest people you will ever met. He's committed to University of Washington, and I can tell you without a doubt, you will hear amazing things out of this young man over the next 4 years. So really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
I have a couple quick questions, a comment. James, I just want to say that the picture that the boosters, I think, posted of you was awesome. So it was so great. I knew you were going to win it, so you already had it, but it was just so awesome to see that picture and see you at the top of the podium. Obviously very humble. And I have a question. So why you dub?
I think it just it was the best fit for me, and I really liked the coach and the team there, and it just made sense when I was on my visit.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to you, and thank you so much. And it was just really wonderful to see you have such a great accomplishment. So
Yes, one of James's teammates will be joining our runner in Eugene at U of O, one of the gentlemen on the team, and then James headed to Washington. So 3 Division I signees out of this class, which is amazing. So, and sworn enemies. Yep. So thank you very much. We're very proud of all of our students and all the wonderful things that they do.
yeah, absolutely. Congratulations to all the athletes, and thank you for being here. And you absolutely do not have to stay. You are more than welcome to go home and study. Okay. Yeah, or maybe run home. Just kidding. Yeah, well deserved. And with that, we'll move on to reports, and I will turn the mic over to Superintendent Cordy.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My report is just really brief tonight, and the first piece of that has to do with what we just were a part of in that spotlight on about all of those student athletes, marching band competitors, and hearing Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Stammers talk about James and all of those students. I am just so proud of all of them and just so thankful. We have amazing opportunities in this district for our students, and hearing a spotlight on like that one is just so heartwarming, especially after what the last couple of years have felt like, and just really has been so void of those moments. So super thankful for that. And just lastly, I just want to wish all of the people in our community and all of our staff members and our students, and certainly you board members as dedicated volunteers, just to have a really peaceful and happy holiday season. I just wish that for all of you, and that as 2022, as we enter into that new year, that it's full of health and happiness. So happy New Year and happy holidays.
Okay, and tonight we do not have an ASB student report, so we will move on to board reports. Director Adamson, do you want to start off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And thank you again to my fellow board members for allowing me to participate virtually. Unfortunately, I had a work conflict that has kept me out of state, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to be with you, though I wish I were there in person with you, and certainly to celebrate the amazing accomplishments of our Sherwood students, who are just, they're always the best in the state, and it's just great to see their many accomplishments this fall. I usually don't like to look backwards, and like to look forwards, but after the last board meeting, there was some concern about whether I had misrepresented some public comments that had been shared. And so I want to take a quick minute to provide some clarity after receiving a request to do so from a member of the community. I just want to share with folks, I absolutely, if I receive an email I read it. I think we all take public comment very seriously, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that's coming this evening about public comment. During the last board meeting, I had indicated that I had not received, at that time, had not received public comment concerning returning in person, except for the public comment that had been provided that evening. Unbeknownst to me, there had been an email from a member of the community who had signed and indicated that they were from Sherwood, that had reached other board members, but had not, for whatever reason, reached my email inbox. When I became aware of that later that week, I apologized, and I want to share with the community that there had been an attempt to reach me and all board members. And had I received that email, I would have disclosed it that evening. I'd also received an unsigned anonymous comment that didn't indicate that that person was from the Sherwood community. I learned later from a non-board member, member of the community, that that person was in fact from Sherwood. Had that been communicated to me by that individual, I absolutely would have communicated that I'd received that comment as well. I choose as a board member to center comments from this community as being central to how I make decisions as a board member, because it should be the residents of the Sherwood School District, not residents of Portland or Beaverton or other communities that drive policy in our district. So I just wanted to be very transparent about the existence of those communications, which ones I had received and which ones I hadn't, and how I weighed those. I don't ever want to be dismissive of a public comment, nor would I ever mislead the public in what I have and haven't received. And so I just wanted to clear the air, and again, at the request of this community member, make sure that an accurate representation of what I had received and how I'd received that was on the record. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Nyangaro?
Not much to report. Just wanted to, thank all the student athletes and all the students that were involved in fall sports, and thank them for their hard work. And thank you for, representing Sherwood and, sportsmanship. It's really, really awesome to see. Second, I just wanted to say we really appreciate, the teachers, and we understand what they're going through, and we just thank them for sticking it, sticking in there with us, and we want to support you as much as we can. And thank you for all your sacrifice and hard work. We really appreciate it. And lastly, I just wanted to, as we go into the holidays, just want to say, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. And that's all I have.
Director Thorne?
You took all the words right out of my mouth. Honestly, ditto to what Director Nyangaro said. So proud of all the fall athletes, and that's so much work, keeping up the grades, keeping up the practice, all the work that goes into that, and it pays off, and we're proud of you. Again, to the teachers and the admin, so much going on, and all of the information that we're getting back about how you're feeling and what you're experiencing is so valuable, and we're listening, and we want to be there for you, care about you a lot. In many ways, you are the anchor of this community, so that's important to us, and you guys are important to us. And again, happy holidays to everybody. Dr. Hawkins?
Yeah, I would just echo what Director Thorne and Dr. Cordy said. I mean, it weighs heavy on my heart to think about all the teachers and the exhaustion that they're going through. And I'm really hopeful that this break is a time of rest and reprieve, and that it's not filled with too much work and busyness, and that they're just able to enjoy time with their families and time away from school, because we know it's been a lot. So I hope we're able to come up with some solutions in the near future that make it even a little bit easier for those teachers, and for our admin, and for the students, and for everyone who's really feeling that stress. So happy holidays.
Yeah, this is one of those times it's really a bummer to go last because there isn't a whole lot more to add.
But really, I'm just really thankful for, the fact that we all get a little bit of a break, well deserved. Hopefully we're winding this whole pandemic down. It's been a crazy roller coaster that none of us would want to go through, and none of us want to continue in this way. So, it's super exciting to hear so much that's going back to more of a normal world. We look forward to that, the same as we look forward to inviting people back into this room, inviting volunteers back into our schools in the future. It's really exciting and well needed. And again, just really want to thank the entire staff at Sherwood, in the Sherwood School District. We can't do it without, the OSEA, SEA, admin, confidential folks. It just takes a village for sure. And it's so impressive that even though things are really difficult and have been and continue to be, there is such a tremendous push and feeling to do whatever we have to do for kids. And I know that's going to continue. And I'm excited for the community to be able to be more involved in that process and really come in and support these kids and staff to get us to the finish line and to the end of this school year, and hopefully get even more of a breather than just a couple weeks. So thank you for that. And that will conclude our reports. We do not have an SCA or OSCA report this evening. So we'll move on to public comment. And I will turn that over to Ms. Andrade and Mr. Rose. They will be reading the comments this evening. Again, as we've talked about in the past, public comment is a time for the board to be listeners. We do not respond to public comment. They will be reading those public comments as written, and we will be listening to those. And again, we don't respond to those directly. So with that, I will turn it over to, looks like Mr. Rose.
Megan Thornton, Sherwood. In talking with school board members over the past few weeks, it has become clear that the Sherwood School District could really use a staff person whose sole focus is communicating with the board and community. Is that something we can do for the fall 2022 school year or sooner? I recognize and am appreciative of the fact that in prior years, SSD has prioritized classroom-specific positions over an administrative role, such as a communications director. However, I feel we're at a point where this could be great use for our community and board who represent us. If this is something we can do, can you please respond in the near term by making an announcement via one of the SSD email bulletins or during an upcoming board meeting? It would be great to know this is a project that the district is taking on or not. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your time and energy in supporting our community. Happy holidays to you and your family.
And excuse me, Angelique Harold, Yorkshire Way. Hello, Dr. Cordy and SSD board members. We would like to ask the board and administrators of both SMS and SHS to address continued confusion, delays, and student safety during drop-off and pickup times. At SMS, it is not clear that parents are not supposed to park their cars in the drop-off line to wait for the doors to open at 8:15. It's understandable that some parents don't want their kids waiting unsupervised outside the school before the doors open, but for those that need to move through the car line, parked cars in the drop-off area create delays and disruption to traffic flow. Potential solutions to this could be staff monitors, signs, and opening the doors earlier. At SHS, parents are choosing to park on Hayes Street just outside the main parking lot entrance to avoid the traffic in the car line at pickup. It is often unclear as to whether or not these cars are waiting to make a right turn into the parking lot or have no intention of turning at all. This creates confusion for all drivers at the intersection, many of whom are students attempting to safely negotiate the intersection as oncoming traffic is trying to make a left turn into the parking lot. Again, signage or staff monitoring would be helpful in reducing this problem. For the most part, parents and student drivers are courteous, patient, and safe, but continued reminders about safe driving on and around school property would be helpful in increasing safety and decreasing stress and frustration. This is especially necessary at SMS, where unexpected and aggressive driving behavior often occurs and is particularly dangerous given the multitude of student walking paths through the parking lots. It's also welcome to see Sherwood police officers on site as an added incentive for drivers to do the right thing. Lastly, the board could significantly impact the high volume and stress of drop-off and pickup traffic by staggering start and end times for SHS and SMS, as well as adding more bus drivers and routes. Please consider evaluating these options and those suggested above to improve the safety of our schools. Thank you, Rob and Angelique Harold.
Stacy Robertson, Sherwood. During the November 17th work session, a DEI overview was presented with some objectives. One of the objectives was to create and promote affinity groups for staff and students. I'm assuming that we are talking about affinity groups that are based on race, ethnicity, gender identity, ideology, etc. A comment was made that we already have affinity groups such as the art club. Please do not equate a group based on an appreciation of art or any other general interest with a group based solely on race, i.e. skin color. Group spaces that directly focus on identity or race are divisive and encourage disunity. I have seen affinity groups at my workplace dissolve into grievance sessions and become more divisive over time, and I predict that this will happen here as well. It was also stated that we will be creating an equity lead for every school building in our district. I don't understand why this is necessary. It sure shows what the priorities are for our school district. We seem to have an obsession with DEI to the detriment of academic rigor and critical thinking skills. Assigning an equity lead for each building reminds me of how Chairman Mao during the Cultural Revolution would assign a communist authority to each village to make sure everyone was implementing the communist program and keeping everyone in line. But then again, the top-down DEI agenda is sort of a cultural revolution, isn't it? Has anyone considered that some of the anxiety and exhaustion among teachers and students could be related to this extraneous layer of social activism being imposed on them? I know firsthand that it had a negative impact on my daughter, and I'm sure that it affects many other students as well.
Eric Flister, Bouchon Terrace. I appreciate several aspects of Director Thorne's proposal. Most importantly, it ensures that everyone who wants to speak will be heard, and online comments will be given the same weight as in person. These are critical priorities. However, moving comments to the end of meetings means that board deliberation and action will not be informed by the public sentiment on agenda items and information in the agenda packet. For public comment to be meaningful, it must precede rather than follow deliberation and action. If it is too exhausting to hear all public comments, I recommend reducing the volume by requiring them to be pertinent to an agenda item. Comments about topics not on the agenda could be moved to the end of the meeting. I know the Taggart-Tualatin School District handles comments this way, although I am strongly opposed to their policy limiting the overall time devoted to hearing comments. Secondly, the proposal does not address the problem that the board has consistently failed to enforce the comment time limit. Many in-person comments go more than a minute over, while online comments are strictly cut. You should install and use a microphone cut switch. They cost less than $5. If you're unwilling to or incapable of enforcing your policies fairly, you should resign. I've heard the community discussing a communications director. I'm strongly opposed to such a position. I receive 3 newsletters a week, one each from the teacher, principal, and superintendent. On the rare occasion of important new information, it is in danger of being overlooked because it is buried amongst redundant information that is the same week after week. School and board policies are published on the web, as are board meetings and agenda packets. Every school has a website full of information and an office that responds to questions by email and phone. I cannot imagine what information or communication is lacking. I have not heard one single example when I've asked. A communications director is a 6-figure position whose main job is to obfuscate the truth with PR spin in order to insulate actual decision makers from feeling an obligation to give frank answers to hard questions. This will serve to disconnect you from community wishes rather than improving anything. Instead, you should create a staff position whose job is to frequently poll parents and students in order to best understand their priorities, concerns, and suggestions.
Steve Robertson, Sherwood. Just today, I came across a very disturbing story at thefederalist.com about a public elementary school in LA promoting an LGBTQ gender identity club. Let me repeat, an elementary school. I can't put the details of the story in this short public comment, but some of what is described amounts to nothing short of grooming. Is there any sanity left in our public schools? Many on the political left will dismiss this reporting because it's from a conservative website, but what about the disturbing content that is being brought to light? This obsession with identity, focusing on race, gender, ethnicity, etc., and using the lens of intersectionality and equity to highlight and promote differences is corrosive and divisive. But our schools just keep making it more and more a priority. To be fair to local schools, it's coming from the highest levels of education because this ideology is thoroughly entrenched in education, including the ODE. But could we at least get some public pushback from our board instead of just parroting and cheerleading the DEI agenda? Surely some of you have been troubled by some of what you've been seeing. If not, maybe it's time to do a little research outside of your education establishment silos and read some of the many thoughtful objections to all this. It's easy to find, and it's from people all across the political spectrum. To use the terminology of the woke, it's time to disrupt and dismantle these new DEI-based power structures within education. The DEI agenda is obviously very destructive, will continue to worsen until it's confronted head on. We can teach and encourage true tolerance and inclusion without all the destructive ideological baggage within critical pedagogy in education. Most of us parents have been doing exactly that with our own kids. So I ask all board members to show some curiosity about why so many parents are so concerned and upset about this stuff. At least read this story and reflect on what we're doing to our kids. And as a bonus, maybe you'll discover one of the major reasons why so many public schools, ours included, are declining in enrollment. The story can be found on the federalist.com website and is written by Spencer Lindquist. Here's the link, hyperlink included. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you both for reading, and thank you to those folks that turned in public comment. We appreciate it and have heard what you had to say. So we will go ahead and move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is information and discussion. So it will be Mr. Rose talking to us about enrollment, giving us an update, and K-5 interdistrict transfers. Podium is yours.
Give me a minute while I adjust from Brady's altitude. Wow. Good evening, good evening, board members, Director or Chair Hecker, Superintendent Corey. Thank you for having me here this evening to talk about enrollment update and potential K-5 interdistrict transfers. So this is something we typically do about this time each year, where we come to you and let you know kind of what our enrollment looks like now that we're about a third of the way through the school year. It's something we will continue to do throughout the year, give you updates as well. But we wanted to make sure you had this opportunity to see where we're at and also recognize that we have some interest in opening interdistrict transfer slots at the K-5 level. As you may recall, we built our 2021-2022 budget on having 4,859 students. On October 1, we had 4,724 students. October 1 is a key date for educators in Oregon because it's the date we report our enrollment to the Department of Education. We will again report that in the spring. And then our final enrollment number actually gets solidified in 2023. So we have a bit of time before these numbers are the kind of put in the books for good. The 4,724 is unfortunately not near the enrollment at the beginning of 2019, which was 5,020. And unfortunately, we haven't seen what we thought was a conservative number of 4,859 reached either. So we are certainly short. We did see a decline after October 1 through the early part of November, where we actually dropped from that 4,724 number. But as of Friday, December 3rd, we had seen a reversal and climb back to within one student of our October 1 numbers. We sat at 4723. Unfortunately, a decline in enrollment also is a decline in our funding. And we expect, based on our October 1 number and the recent estimates from ODE on what they anticipate per ADM funding will be, that we have an enrollment shortfall causing $276,000 of less funding for our school district. Not an insignificant number for us to be dealing with. And certainly if you have questions throughout these few slides, let me know and I will stop. For tonight's discussion, we wanted to share with you the current enrollment numbers at the elementary schools. As you can see, each has some capacity left. The greatest capacity being at the Ridges, which is also where the growth from Brookman Road is slated to attend. And speaking of Brookman Road, based on construction activity and conversations with the realtor that is working on the project that's furthest along, we do expect that we will see homes occupied by the fall. So we're going to start to see some student attendance based on the Brookman Road developments.
How many homes are slated for that project?
I don't know for the one that's currently under construction. I know that for the entire stretch of Brookman Road, the last numbers I was seeing from the city had around 1,100 homes. Now that's going to be over quite a number of years, obviously. But with our kind of uptake rate for homes being almost one student per home that's built, we can anticipate 1,100 kids across our K-12 schools in the not too distant future. Certainly. So to help with the that shortfall of funding, what we would like to propose, and you'll see it later in an action item, is to allow interdistrict transfers at the kindergarten through 5th grade, specifically at Middleton Elementary, and it would be 5 students per grade for this year that we are currently in, the 21-22 school year. Those students that would apply and get released from their own district would be able to attend Sherwood School District until graduation. You may ask, well, why grades K-5 and not the middle school and the high school? Well, we've actually opened slots at each of those already. And one of the things that we're always concerned about is overloading a class or overloading, frankly, the district with what we refer to as the tail. So if you let a student in at 9th grade, you know you have them for 4 years. If you let them in earlier, you have them for a much longer period of time. And so we're always trying to balance that, looking at our total student population today, as well as projections into the future. That's why for a very long time, we didn't allow transfers. And it's only been fairly recently that we did at the high school level. And that was because of the new capacity of the new high school. And now the middle school. And what we're suggesting is we have the capacity at elementary to do it at K-5 as well.
Can I ask you why they would have to attend Middleton out of all the elementary schools?
You are just about 2 seconds ahead of where I was going. So I'm going to cover why Middleton and why not the other buildings. So why Middleton? One, it has the capacity to accommodate across all grades. It's got limited undeveloped property within its boundaries where you might see additional construction over the next 6 years, which is really what we're worried about because we're going to start kids potentially kindergarten. We will have them for the next number of years. And so we want to make sure that capacity is there. They're kind of landlocked, shall we say, from development, whereas looking at the Ridges, they're going to receive all of those students from Brookman Road based on our current boundaries. There's also areas within Hawksview that could potentially be developed over time. So the question might be, why not Archer Glen? And it's actually because Archer Glen has a high kindergarten and a high 5th grade. And so we didn't want to overload those 2 grades when they're already quite large. And the idea that if we want families to potentially bring their students from other districts, telling them, well, if you have a kindergarten, you're going to have to go to this school, but if you have a 3rd grader, they might go to a different school, might limit who wants to attend. And then Hawksview is frankly the closest to capacity by percentage. And so really, when we kind of looked at all of those factors, it made the most sense that Middleton would be the location. They have the capacity across K-5, which I actually will show you here in just a moment. The other question you might have is why just 1 year? Why are we coming to you with just for the remainder of this year that we're already in? And that's really because this is a conversation that I get to come back to you each year, each spring, and talk about, do we want to do this again? Do we want to do it at all grades, certain grades? And so this is not the last time you'll hear from me, but really we're looking at for 21, 22. And then I will remind you that for students that transfer into our district, there are a couple stipulations on staying here, and those are related to attendance and behavior. And so that's part of the whole application process. Parents have to sign off that those 2 stipulations will be met. And I will say we've weathered what has frankly been a tough couple of years on the budget without having to do layoffs. And so we would like to allow these interdistrict transfers to help us tend to the budget shortfall kind of to the greatest extent possible. Let me show you those Middleton numbers. So this is what our student population and student to staff ratio would look like. It would leave capacity similar to what is at Archer Glen and Hawksview. So we're not suddenly overloading Middleton kind of in an unfair way compared to the other 2 schools that are closer to capacity. And then the student to staff ratio would increase by about 1.67 students per teacher. And that's assuming we get every slot filled at every grade. So 30 students would certainly put a large dent into that anticipated budget shortfall we discussed and have, frankly, a relatively small effect on our total student population over the next 12 years. With that, I'd open it to discussion or questions.
So just to follow up with the question I asked about Middleton, sorry, I'm a director and someone asked me. I'm just specifically thinking more of like blended families. Like I have a family and my kids go to, Archer, and my stepchild goes to a school in Tualatin. I'd love to have him move over, but it wouldn't really make sense for me to have him move over and then still be going to another elementary school. And so not having been a part of this process before, and since it's still relatively pretty few kids, I mean, it's like 30 total children. Is it not something that you can look at on an individual basis at all?
We
It's too messy.
we actually have to open them up either we have to open them up by grade and by location.
Okay.
And so and Gary, you might jump in if I'm misrepresenting any of this, but we'd like to be able to act independently and based on this student applied and that student applied, but it has to be through a lottery process. It kind of has to be blind. We don't get to pick and choose which students come. It's those that apply to the lottery. If they're one of the lucky ones selected, they get to attend, and we basically have no capability to direct students to a building or to pick which kids can come.
So I actually have a
Yeah,
question.
Dr. Robertson, go ahead.
Yeah, a question related to that, and then a separate one. In that instance where you had a blended family and you wanted to bring a student over because one of the, one of the parents would be in the district, you'd be able to bring that student over and establish just residency as being in the Sherwood district and then be able to send them to Archer or wherever it is that sibling group is, because there's residency. Am I right about that, or is that off?
I think that's correct. So what you're saying is if there's a blended family and the student lives with one parent who lives in Tualatin and another parent lives in Sherwood, they would, if they're moving in with the parent in Sherwood, that would establish residency and they could attend the same school as their sibling.
Right.
So that would be accurate.
Okay, and so then the other question I have is about sibling groups. So let's say we've got a family in Tualatin or Newburgh or whatever, and they've got a kid in 2nd grade and a kid in 4th grade, and they want to come over, but they enter the lottery. Can we preference sibling groups? So if sibling in 4th grade gets in, then the sibling in 2nd grade has preference to come ahead of that lottery, because I think otherwise it becomes real awkward if we end up splitting sibling groups. We could end up preferencing kids that then choose not to come or would have come had they been able to bring a sibling. And then I think it just leads to the potential that that becomes a real issue for families.
I'm gonna ask Gary if he knows the definitive answer on that.
I don't have a definitive answer. The answer is I don't think so, but we'll need to reread the law. But I don't think we can preference a sibling for a student who's not already in our district. I'm not even sure we could if they were already here, but I'm more confident that if they're not already in our district, we couldn't preference. I do think our odds of getting 5 kids at any grade level between now and the end of the year are pretty small, though. I think we'd be fortunate if we had that, and then we could talk about some solutions if we did get there. I think there might be some, but similar to what we've done for seniors before, when we had seniors returning in the past, and we opened up 2 spots at 12th grade for. I think there's some things we could do.
Okay.
But I don't believe we'll get into that situation, but I don't think we can preference them in the lottery.
There's something rolling around in my brain about previously we somehow preference siblings, but that may be under a different set of criteria that's changed since then. So thank you for looking into it. And I too would be surprised if we hit the 5 cap in every group, but if we end up doing that and it's one more kid and it's a sibling, like it feels like something we ought to talk about.
I agree. I know that one area we were able to preference in the past was, I think, students that attended our charter school.
And students who'd attended Sherwood in the past, we were able to, and I'll have to look into this. I'll look into the siblings thing. I'm not totally sure.
What about teachers' kids, teachers that don't live in district, but they have kids that age? Do they get any kind of, because obviously that would, if a teacher wants to apply for their kid and they don't live in district, is there any?
That has been an ongoing question for us because we have that exact situation with certain staff members. That one I know we are unable to preference, but again, in this current environment, I don't expect that we will get 5 at any grade level. And so this would be an ideal time for those staff members to get their kids into our school district.
I appreciate the discussion because I think people in general don't understand that many years ago, we essentially had the ability to sort of, do things that probably were a little bit sensible, adding or changing or doing things that made sense that really was taken away. And it's this process that's very stringent. It used to kind of be if a district wanted to let a student go and we wanted to accept that student, that just happened. And that isn't the case anymore. So it helps, I think, to talk through, the very stringent process we have to go through, and that it just isn't as simple as it used to be. So I appreciate you walking us through that, Mr. Rose.
Sorry, one last question, but just to follow up, why are we not allowed to preference teacher kids? Is it just a law? That's what I was wondering.
It's essentially the law, and the law is to try to level a playing field for all students. And so you can't choose the students that are academically excelling or the student athlete that happens to be very good. And so it kind of has put into place a blind process where it's just a lottery that we allow X number based on what we decide we need or can allow. And then the lottery happens and it's those students that are selected get to come. And if there's more than that, the students don't get to, but it's, and so it's the same with the student of a teacher.
Yeah, it seems unfortunate, especially right now when teachers are already feeling so overwhelmed and stressed, if we had the ability to do that for a teacher. But yeah,
it's one of those things I wish we could do differently because I know how valuable it is to be a parent and have your student in your own district as opposed to just dealing with the logistics. I mean, we have districts that start schools at different times than we start, and that makes it a challenge for some parents.
And I do believe that if passes later tonight, we still have slots open at grades 6 through 12. Is that correct?
We do.
That are unfilled. So any teacher who wanted to today could have their student come into our district from another district in grades 6 through 12. And I believe that when we open these 30 spots, we might fill a couple of them, but I believe our teachers, if they want to do that, could make that change right now within this law. And even though the law was designed to be a blind system, you know, like a non-discriminatory system, because there were districts who were discriminating, they were picking and choosing which students got in and from which neighborhoods they would select students from. And that's why the legislature took action on this about 8 years ago, something along those lines. And but we have been able to let students come into our district or stay in our district using this law, and I think we can continue to do that. So I believe our teachers who want to do that, and I know of a couple who talk to me about it on a regular basis, I would imagine we'll see action from them about 7 minutes after the gavel drops.
So in the work session, one of the issues was workload. So now we're talking about adding more students to the district. So I just was curious if there was going to be any sort of impact on workload. I would imagine so, but is it negligible or?
Essentially, if we had 5 students at each grade at Middleton, our staff or student to staff ratio would rise by about 1.67 students. Again, not expecting a full 5 at each grade level. It will vary based on who signs up and which grades they come in at.
Just the other thing I would add to that is that with the enrollment drop that Mr. Rose has talked about from nearly 5,000 students pre-pandemic to 4,700 now, the vast majority of those have been at the elementary school, and we've done no reductions in staffing. So we've reduced well over 250 students, and we still have the same number of teachers we've had. And so that will certainly create a workload issue for, you know, those teachers who pick up one, maybe 2 kids a piece. But on the whole, 23.1 across an elementary school is the lowest staffing ratio we've had in this district in the time that I've been in this position, which has been nearly 10 years. And so there certainly is that there, but that was also part of the strategic reason for picking elementary school, because that is, we want to be able to hold on, we want to be able to maintain our enrollment at that level. It's just a good thing overall. And so that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, and continuing in the information and discussion portion of our meeting, we're about to talk about public attendance and public comment procedures. Just as a background, I just want to thank Director Thorne for taking this project on. I think it became pretty comprehensive, pretty big thing. We had a good amount of input from community members, the Sherwood School District Executive Team, board members, and then just other data as to what neighboring districts were doing. So with that, I will turn over the mic to Director Thorne to talk about where we've kind of landed and start a discussion about public attendance and public comment.
Thank you, Chair Hecker. I actually am grateful for this opportunity. It was really nice to be able to engage with community members and the executive team and the board on this. And I'm excited to go over it and hopefully come to a decision on it. And then we can, at future board meetings, get back to the kids and start talking about meetings. So I'm going to read what I've prepared. The following guideline for meetings and public comments are a combination of district executive team suggestions, individual board member suggestions, and suggestions from members of the community. I'll start with the summary for guidelines of meetings. Open meetings to the public following current applicable safety recommendations, such as mask required, so long as the current mandate is in effect. Physical distancing of 6 feet apart, so long as that is the recommendation. Capacity will allow for the above physical distancing guideline, meaning that once all seats are taken, the room will be deemed at capacity. All requirements will change as state recommendations change without further discussion needed. Signs and banners. Signs and banners do fall under the First Amendment freedom of speech and therefore should be permitted so long as they are appropriate, meaning they do not contain anything that violates public comment policy, such as naming staff or teachers, and do not contain threats. They do not block the view of other attendees. They do not cause disruption to the meeting by making noise. Any attendees who exhibit behavior such as threats, harassment, bullying will be trespassed from future meetings. In-person attendees need to be respectful to those presenting by remaining quiet and observing behavior appropriate of a public hearing. No clapping, booing, hissing, cheering, pointing, trying to communicate verbally with members of the board. The board needs to be able to hear public comment and ensure that all perspectives can feel heard without fear. In order to make that happen, the audience cannot become part of the speaker's presentation. It also enables the board to debate issues amongst themselves and determine courses of action without getting sidetracked or confused because of audience interruption. If at any time these guidelines are not adhered to, the meeting will be called to recess by the board chair. All attendees dismissed, and the meeting will commence via live stream. The rationale behind these above decisions was the executive team and board members should not be required to be mask enforcers, nor should they be expected to manage disruptive behavior. We are there to get a job done that focuses on our kids, and any time that takes away from that common purpose takes away from productive work of the board and the executive team. The SRO and/or Sherwood PD will be invited to attend meetings, but the district will not require law enforcement attendance. If a member of the community board or district desires to ask the SRO or law enforcement to attend, that is their right to do so. But the presence of the SRO or law enforcement will not be required to allow public attendance. In the event that a situation arises where Sherwood PD need to be called, we will do so. Rationale behind that is if PD attendance is required to conduct a meeting, this could cause meeting disruption if there is an emergency in place that requires their services elsewhere.
Do we want to stop there and maybe go over that part? Okay. Sure. So what we're going to do is go ahead and have a little bit of a discussion, but if it's okay, I have a couple of things that I probably want to start with and clarify. If we go down to number 3, I did do some background work under trespass and what that would mean. So we consulted legal counsel on that to find out what would that entail.
And by that you mean
if we were
just
to
for
trespass
people that are
someone.
listening, what is the legal what is our legal capability to deem someone as trespassing? Right?
So yes, so there are very specific conditions for trespassing. Interruption and interference with the meeting does fall within those conditions. A trespass should expire at the end at a 6-month time frame, unless there's some other reason to believe the individual poses a threat to student, staff, or other locations. The trespass would be for school board meetings themselves. So it would not extend to other schools unless there was something else going on. So these are specific to board meetings only. It would be a 6-month period of time. The recommendation from legal is to have trespass forms on hand at the meeting that indicate what trespass would mean, and that if you were to be someone that was trespassed, hopefully this never happens. There is also a request, and there would be someone can appeal the trespass. So for our intent, for all of our purposes, essentially, if someone were to be trespassed for poor behavior, it's a 6-month, you're out of here. So that would really be, towards the end of the school year. So that's what we mean, or what trespass would mean from a legal standpoint. Just wanted to address the SRO and Sherwood PD situation, just to be clear. I think Director Thorne is right on that. We don't want to build this into some sort of policy that's so permanent that it would, if something were to come up, that we wouldn't be able to conduct district business because we didn't have law enforcement here. That doesn't mean we're not going to have them here. I think it will be a really awesome thing to have our SRO and Sherwood PD be involved and help us as needed. So that makes a lot of sense as to why we're not going to embed this into some sort of policy change. So I appreciate that. And that's really all I had, just for some clarification.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Any other questions, comments regarding to guidelines for meeting? Okay, great. We can move on to the public comment portion.
Okay. First one, in an effort to respect the time of district staff and presenters, public comment should be moved to the last agenda item at all meetings. The rationale behind this was by moving the public comment portion to the end of the meetings, we are being respectful of presenters, staff, and attendees who may wish to only hear a specific portion of the meeting and therefore does not require them to stay unnecessarily through the comment period. All public comment will be accepted per existing policy. The policy is BDDH. It is not in the best interest of the community, board, or district to exclude public comment, as this could lead to discrimination and/or censorship issues. The rationale behind this was, while on very rare occasions public comment period has run long, it most often is always under an hour. In the very rare event that it does go over, we do need to respect the needs of the community to be heard and listened to. Online comment submission should be submitted by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting to allow enough time for the board secretary to print the comments. Sign up for in-person comment shall be available up to 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. The rationale behind this is the board secretary has many duties in preparation for a meeting. If someone is unable to meet the 3 p.m. deadline, they still have then the option to present in person. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Online comments will be read by district staff and will be allowed the same 3 minutes per comment. Rationale behind this is the average allotment for each public comment is 3 minutes, and we should follow this model. If a student wishes to make in-person public comment, they will be given priority to speak first. There should be a space on the sign-up sheet to indicate if the speaker is a student, so the board secretary can easily and quickly identify those presenters. Additionally, if a student makes an online submission, they should indicate as such that those student comments can be read first. Rationale behind this is students come first, and so therefore they should be made the priority. After all students have presented, public comment shall then alternate between the live presenter and the online submission. Rationale is this provides a fair and equitable solution for both online and in-person comment. At the end of the 3-minute mark, the board chair shall stop the presenter/reader from continuing. Rationale is it's important to respect the time of both the board and the executive team, as well as the other presenters. As per board policy, comments containing complaints about specific staff members are not allowed. Complaints should be submitted via the district official complaint procedure, which can be found online. Rationale is this policy is in place for good reason and is not the intent of this board to change current policy. Time to discuss and address public comment should be added to the agenda for each meeting immediately following the consent agenda. The total time for discussion should not exceed 30 minutes, which affords each board member 5 minutes and the district executive team 5 minutes. However, minutes may be yielded if necessary or desired. Rationale: it's important to engage with our stakeholders and ensure that they feel heard. This gives the opportunity for the board or executive team to address specific comments or concerns if they choose. I will add, there is going to be some discussion on this just from some research that we've done between when I prepared this and now. So more discussion to come on that. Lastly, privacy. The district should only require that the commenter state their first name and that they live in Sherwood for the purposes of privacy. Because address and last name are required to accept public comment, submissions should be submitted as follows. Online submissions should include this information. However, when online submissions are read aloud, only the first name in the city should be read. For the in-person sign-up, writing down the address on a shared sign-up form should be stopped, and instead, individual sign-up cards shall be used for each presenter to fill out and put in a separate submission box to be collected 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. The information submitted on the sign-up or comment form should be sufficient to ensure that the same comment or comment from the same person is not read twice. Rationale: there has been a lot of conversation about anonymity, privacy, etc., with respect to board comments, public comments, apologies. I think we need to be able to have enough information to distinguish between residents of the district or folks from other communities while also respecting the privacy of the commenter in these changing times. No one should be fearful of speaking because they do not feel comfortable giving their full name or address out. And that concludes the read. I will say, just to start real quick, and I believe this was brought up after this was typed as well, and we did hear a little bit about tonight about the public comment at the end of the meeting versus at the beginning. And if it's regarding something on the agenda, that it should actually be read before that agenda item is covered. So perhaps we can talk about having 2 public comment periods where when on the sign-up sheet, if they're marking something that it is part of the agenda, we do hear those first, and then the remaining at the end of the meeting.
Perfect. And I do have some language for that as needed. So I'll go ahead and start off again, just for some clarification. And I'm going to jump kind of to the back, and Director Thorne already alluded to this in the portion that talks about time to discuss and address public comment. That's something that didn't, that legal had some challenges with. And so we're a little bit limited. So I'll read what they had to say about board members acknowledging or discussing public comment from a prior board meeting. And what they came back to us with was one of the significant issues would be selective response. It would be challenging if board members only respond to those comments that they agree with. That would provide a skewed perspective of the comments from the previous meeting. So it was really suggested a better approach for response would be to request a topic be added to the agenda, or have the board and actually have staff respond to public comment. It just wasn't something, there's a real liability and a challenge. If there are some comments discussed by board members or some sort of agreement, we don't want to get into a situation legally where it could appear that by commenting on a comment or making some statement that it's some type of vote without a vote. So I think our thought process at this point is that we really need to take that and ask, because we all do want to be responsive to public comment as a whole, that we take that portion out and that we really look at this and ask the district to come back potentially with some ways that maybe we could address that, whether it's online on the website, but maybe that's something that we just really need to look at. And rather than jumping into, kind of a process that we should really think that through. We know we want to do it. We know we want, good communication. But that's not something that we're able to do and speak to as a board, according to legal. So that would be my recommendation for that piece, to really come back to that and ask the district to work on that for us. And I do have some language for the very first bullet point that we can add. So I would be wanting as we move forward in our discussion to take that portion out of the recommendations. And then perhaps under that first bullet, we're removing the bulk of public comments to the end, that as Director Thorne mentioned, that in an effort to respect the time, district staff and presenters, public comment should be divided into 2 sections. Public comment from Sherwood School District students and adults concerning an agenda item, especially or particularly scheduled for a second read or final disposition, would be moved following the reports where public comment has been, so that we can hear those comments. All other public comments would be moved to the end of the agenda. And so we would ask that staff could develop a process to identify students. I think we've already talked about that, as well as adults with comments on an agenda item for a decision at that evening's meeting. So I think if we change that language on the first one, that would kind of cover those bases. So that's really all I have to add. So anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I feel like part of the reason we even have this bullet point about responding is because I was bringing up that I wanted us to start being able to respond to comments. And just to clarify, when I brought it up, my sole intention was to respond to comments that we are already doing work around. I know now from sitting in this seat as opposed to being at home that when we hear comments, the district is busy working and writing down the comments and doing things all the time, creating action to answer to those comments. But sometimes it's not communicated always very clearly to people at home. So it was never my intention to suggest that we open it up to all the board to respond however they may to whatever comment is put out there. I really had more in mind a very structured thought process where one person was planning on responding, likely somebody from the district, to a particular comment that they could describe what action took place because that comment came about. So that really was my thought process. And I didn't intend for it to get to this place where it was like anybody just respond. And so I think it would be great if the district was able to think about that. Because even sometimes, I know Dr. Cordy, you sometimes do answer like what I'm referring to in your reports anyways. But I think making it more intentional to the public that this is in response to comment that we have heard, this is what we're doing in the district. So, I mean, whether it's built into your own report or somebody else in the district responds, that's really more what I had in my mind, because I don't want to run into legal issues either, or be speaking on things that I really don't have the right information about. So just wanted to put that out there.
Director Adamson.
Yeah, I just want to start by echoing your comments about just the great work that Director Thorne has done here. I really appreciate the way that she has listened to so many different perspectives and come up with a proposal that is thoughtful, representative of the many concerns that I heard from across a wide range of folks. And I really appreciate her thoughtful efforts here, and am really grateful for the discussion this evening. I support the conversation about creating 2 public comment times. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, we don't have students very often, but when they're here, they should go, you know, early. And when we've got something on the agenda, which again, not always very often where we're making a final decision, something that evening, we've got lots of comments, but if we do, we should hear them first as good practice. So I think those are really thoughtful approaches to that. And I really like it. I have one thing, and I apologize. I just caught this as Director Thorne was reading through it on page 3, this actually is the last comment. I absolutely support this change in privacy approach, because I do think it will ease the way of our folks in feeling like it's more comfortable to provide comment. I just noticed that in that bullet about privacy, that the commenter shall state their name and that they live in Sherwood. This is something that I frankly didn't even know when I got on the board until we were working on bond campaigns. We have a handful of constituents in this district that live in Newburgh. They have a Newburgh address but are in our district, or they have a Tualatin address or a Wilsonville address, just because the district lines are really weird. But I can't imagine that the intention was to exclude them at all. I think it's just, if we could change Sherwood to city, I think that might be a little bit easier for those folks who may, for whatever reason, have be in one city but be in the Sherwood district.
I agree. Thank you for pointing that out.
No, that's a
Good
great
point.
catch too. Yeah, so I'll change that language so we can move ahead on that. Any additional thoughts, comments, anything really from the executive team that we need to be cognizant of, or any other omissions?
Director Thorne, I want to thank you for inviting my team and I to also provide input into this conversation, and really, you know, incorporating so much of what we suggested into this. So thank you for that.
Ms. Andre?
I just also wanted to express my thanks, and I really appreciate really thinking through the logistical elements of this, because that is a huge concern. And also, I just wanted to share with the board that once you do move forward and take action on this, our OSBA policy team has already offered to take our proposal and look at our existing public comment policy and work with us to do all of the changes to incorporate whatever is voted on by this board. So that I wanted you to be aware that work will kind of automatically happen based on whatever you decide to approve.
Thank you.
So what's interesting about that, oh, sorry, Director Adamson, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I want us to be really true to the process that we set out. I support incorporating this into policy, but I don't want subsequent policy changes to delay our work and the great work that Director Thorne has done from implementing what she's presented tonight with applicable changes, from being able to meet that commitment that the community will be back in January and that we'll move forward with these new processes. I just want to confirm that we can make the changes to our policies later, but implement these things now that are primarily procedural in nature, effective for our January board meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is
we're-
correct. Oh, sorry, go ahead. There's nothing that would hinder us from moving forward with implementing. It's more of the housekeeping of making sure that the language that's posted within our board policy matches our actual practice, but we could implement right away. That was my understanding from OSBA.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because we're not changing, for members of the community, we are not changing any policy by adopting these guidelines this evening. So we're following the right procedures for that as far as implementation goes.
Yeah, and
Thank you. I just wanted to be super clear so that there is no confusion in the community and so that we keep faith with what we had all talked about.
agreed. I think it's maybe helpful and why some of this became so comprehensive is that we have a lot of options for public comment. There really isn't a whole lot written into board policy. It just leaves it very flexible, which is something that really we need. We need to have the ability in this pandemic. We've needed to have flexibility for all kinds of things we never thought of. So really, public comment can range from anything to just accepting public comment and putting it in a board packet to what you see here. So there's so much that differs. And I think in the last meeting you saw in the 9 or the 8 different groups that I looked at for how they address things, no one is identical. Everyone does things a little bit differently. So the good news is we have the flexibility to make the changes that we need to. And obviously they're a little bit phased. We have this is where we are in the pandemic with the mask mandate and restrictions. And as we move forward, we'll shed those issues and move ahead. So it's great that we do have the flexibility. We don't have to do a first and second read on this issue. We've taken plenty of comment in the last month, and I did actually check in. Ms. Andrig, you helped me on that to just double and triple check with everyone that we are acting properly procedurally, and we do not have to do a first and second read. We can go ahead and as Director Adamson said, move right on with plans if it passes and we all come to an agreement as a majority. So any further comments, discussions, questions, additions?
I just want to thank Director Thorne for all the hard work in putting that together.
I hate to belabor the point, but there is one thing that I'll be honest, I really struggle with as we talk about public comment. And the thing that I struggle with is the balance of listening to everyone and and setting a time limit. That's a challenge because I definitely want to hear everyone. I mean, we've been through boundary discussions that have lasted a long time. That's not the norm. Having a lot of lengthy public comment definitely isn't our norm. And I hope it doesn't become that, because a lot of times, we hear a lot of redundancies, but, overall, our public comment has been relatively short. So as I struggle with, do we put a time limit on it? Do we say agenda only? I do feel like it's just not a direction I would want to go. So I just wanted to share that as much as I struggle with that, I do think we need to be open to hearing everyone, even if it takes a little bit longer. But I'd given that a lot of thought. So any further comments, discussion? Are we okay? I think I have the language we need. So with that, I will turn the mic back over to Mr. Rose for the appointment of a budget committee member.
Thank you, Chair Hecker, Superintendent Cordy, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to have you appoint a new member to the Sherwood School District Budget Committee. Position number 2 is vacant as the 3-year term has expired. Earlier this evening, you had the opportunity to interview a potential candidate, and so I'm asking for your direction on approving or appointing that individual, Matt Kaufman, or not.
Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and take a vote on any questions or comments in regard to the budget committee. Okay,
Just a comment that I am grateful for the applicant that we have. He seems like a great fit.
okay. So with that, all those in favor, whoops.
Chair Hecker.
Yeah.
Just as a
You want to do a roll
procedural.
call? That'd be perfect.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so we will do a roll call vote. So Director Nongaro,
Yay.
Director Thorne,
Yay.
Director Hawkins,
Yay.
Director Adamson,
Yay.
and Director Hecker.
Yay.
Okay, so that's 5 votes yay, 0 nay, and appointment carries.
Great. With that, I'll say congratulations to Matt Kaufman and move along to the next agenda item, which is mine also, which is our request to open up an inter-district transfer slots at Middleton in grades K through 5 with 5 at each grade level.
So is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we open 5 slots at Middleton, 5 slots per grade, K through 5 at Middleton Elementary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second, Director Nyangaro. Any comments, discussions, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Rose. Okay, that went very quickly, so we will move right back along. I feel a little out of sorts. It's been a little more than a month since we've met. We've been meeting so much more frequently that, it seems like it's been a long time. In any case, so we will move on to the action item, the adoption of public attendance and public procedures. So at this point, we have 2 portions. So the guidelines for meetings, and then the guidelines for public comment. And we have a couple changes to the first section in public comment, which would state that in an effort to respect the district time, staff, and presenters, public comments will be divided into 2 sections: public comments from Sherwood School District students and comments from adults concerning an agenda item scheduled for a second read or final disposition shall be taken following the reports section of the board agenda. All other public comments shall be moved to the last agenda item at all meetings. Staff will develop a process to identify students as well as adults with comments on an agenda item for decision at that evening's meeting. So that would be a change to the first one. The second would be all public comment will be accepted per existing policy, BDDH. It is not in the best interest of the community. Online comment submissions should be submitted by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting to allow enough time for the board secretary to print comments. Sign up for in-person comments shall be available up until 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. The next area, public comment, is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Online comments will be read by district staff and will be allowed the same 3 minutes per comment. If a student wishes to make in-person public comment, they will be giving priority to speak first. There should be a space on the sign-up sheet to indicate if the speaker is a student, so the board secretary can easily and quickly identify those presenters. Additionally, if a student makes an online submission, they should indicate as such, so the student comments can be read first. The next is after all students have presented, public comment shall then alternate between the live presenter and the online submission. Next, at the end of the 3-minute mark, the board chair shall stop the presenter reader from continuing. As per board policy, comments containing complaints about specific staff members are not allowed. Complaint should be submitted via the district's official complaint procedure. And then the next item, the time to discuss and address public comment, I would recommend striking that section. And then moving on to privacy, the district should only require that the commenter state their first name and that they live in the Sherwood School District enrollment area for the purposes of privacy. And the rest would be as follows. So those would be what we were talking about. And is there a motion?
I motion to adopt the public attendance and public comment guidelines.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comment, discussion, questions, clarifications? Okay, all those in favor of for approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We will see folks in January. So thank you for that. And with that, we are adjourned and we will be back January 19th. So happy holidays to everyone and thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Good night.